Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Virginia Palacios. I'm the Executive Director of Commission Shift, and I'm based in Laredo, Texas. I'm joined by panelists Alexis Iwasu and Randy Trevino with the Raíces Collaborative and Becky Smith with Clean Water Action. Together, we co-lead the Texas Carbon Capture and Storage Community Advocacy Coalition. So thanks for joining us today for this virtual rally against Texas primacy. Next slide. We're just going to talk a little bit today about what's been going on today with EPA's movement to grant Texas primacy for carbon dioxide injection. We'll give everyone a little overview of the carbon capture and storage supply chain just to explain what we're talking about. And we'll talk a little bit about why the coalition is opposing primacy in Texas. Then we'll end things with a little bit of what you can do to comment during this primacy rulemaking that we expect is coming up. And we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Next slide. So today at the Railroad Commission open meeting, the EPA signed a memorandum of agreement with the Railroad Commission. And so that is one of the last steps before a rulemaking will start at EPA to potentially grant the Railroad Commission primacy over Class 6 carbon dioxide injection wells. EPA Region 6 Administrator Scott Mason was at the Railroad Commission open meeting, and he said that EPA recognizes the Railroad Commission is best equipped to protect underground sources of drinking water while restoring American energy dominance. He also said he was looking forward to celebrating the next milestone with the Railroad Commission, which will be full program primacy. And so based on these comments, we're expecting the EPA to move forward with a rulemaking to grant primacy to the Railroad Commission very soon. And as a part of that rulemaking, there will be a public comment period, and the public will have the opportunity to request a public hearing during the rulemaking process. And so we want to make sure that the public is fully prepared to participate in the rulemaking process. Next slide. So it's important to understand that when Texas gets primacy, we're expecting to see rapid, widespread commercial development of carbon capture and storage infrastructure across the state. Although primacy only relates to injection wells, this development will also include carbon dioxide pipelines and capture facilities at power plants and other emitting sources, potentially refineries. In this map, the saline aquifers in Texas are shaded in blue, and these are areas that are considered to be good for carbon dioxide injection. Although we already have a carbon dioxide pipeline network in West Texas, we haven't seen rapid, widespread commercial development of this kind of infrastructure throughout the state yet. And so that's what primacy will potentially bring to our state. Now I'm going to pass it over to Alexis Iwasu to give an overview of the carbon capture and storage supply chain.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say it's Alexis Iwasu. Sorry, Virginia. And
Sorry.
I'll be covering the CCS supply chain and then also the primacy process of going from like a state or from the EPA to the state. My background is in geology, chemistry, and petroleum engineering. And so let's get started. So this is the CCS supply chain can start out at an oil and gas field, at a power generation plant, or at a chemical plant, such as an ammonia plant. All these types of industry are common in Texas, along the Gulf Coast, along the bayous in Houston, and populated areas in East Texas, West Texas, and South Texas. So the example on the screen includes an oil and gas field and refinery on the left, and an industrial facility on the right. And the oil refinery and industrial facility both emit a flue gas, which is a combination of contaminants such as carbon dioxide, VOCs, ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, lead, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. So this emitted gas from these plants and facilities make the air difficult to breathe and function in, which is why it's a regulated waste emission. There are a number of filtration processes that have been greenlit by the Department of Energy and the National Energy Technology Laboratory, despite the fact that their technology readiness levels are still in the deployment stage. So compounding this fact is that no one has addressed what is going to happen to the secondary waste products. So like while they're taking the CO2, everything else I mentioned, such as VOCs, ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, lead, and sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. Those are like the secondary waste products. And for that funding, the CO2, needs to be at a purification level of 95% or higher. So that rest of the pollutants is in the emitted gas must be captured and removed. But because this technology hasn't been fully deployed yet, we can't know where this is going. Another thing to notice in this graphic is the layering of these rock formations are fairly horizontal with minimal disruption. And this is a highly simplified schematic of the subsurface. So, excuse me, to give you all an idea, there is no subsurface that has these perfect layer cake formations. Just to give a brief idea of the beautiful complexity of our Texas geology, here are a couple of images of the Gulf Coast up here and the Permian Basin regions down here, where the subsurface has been thoroughly researched, mapped, and vetted through imaging and physical metrics, but even this can still not be the exact way that it looks. Not only do we have multiple faults that disrupt the layer cake look, but many of these formations are dipping and bending, and these faults can act as pathways for any subsurface fluid to breach into other layers. That includes the water that we drink from, and even as so much as reaching the surface where we live, play, garden, and go to school. And some of these corporations might say that their area of injection won't be near any of these faults because they're using geologic modeling. It is a risk that they're willing to take. Two additional risks that these corporations are willing to take is one, that CO2 is an acid that will mix with water to create carbonic acid, which will slowly dissolve both the impermeable and injected layers. So it'll start eating away at the rock and allow for another pathway of transmission. And number two is the CO2 is a gas that can become incompressible, meaning that the volume doesn't change significantly when under pressure. So if there's a lot of buildup with this in the rate or in the pressure of this gas, it eventually force the rock open, and it can cause a fracture, it can cause a fault, or induce an earthquake. So we're going to shift into the primacy process. So at this time, the RRC is the agency that reviews Class 2 underground injection control programs. The EPA is the agency that reads through all these Class 6 applications at this time. And so above is this, at the top here is the primacy application timeline that the states must follow in order to get evaluation or regulatory control for these underground injection control programs. And there's 6 types of wells that follow under this, and today we're focusing on Class 2 and Class 6. The Texas RRC applied for primacy over Class 6 underground injection control programs in May 3rd of 2022. And then in December 19th of 2022, the EPA actually began reviewing the application. So to speed up that process, the RRC submitted amendments twice in 2023 to align more with the EPA's underground injection control requirements. And as Virginia mentioned earlier this morning at the open meeting, the Texas RRC and EPA Region 6 signed the amended MOA. So we're right here at this phase 3 in progress area. The EPA is supposed to ensure that the states and territories and tribes who are applying and granted primacy follow the minimum federal requirements, which in this case is a federal environmental policy known as the Safe Drinking Water Act, SDWA. And this requires injection programs to have guards that protect underground sources of drinking water from endangerment. So this expectation is meant to transfer over from the applicant. So that means the Texas RRC will have to ensure that their underground injection control program for Class 6 wells is robust enough to protect our drinking water. And so the concern here is really this is the only requirement they need to fulfill for an underground injection control program, which is not enough considering the numerous risks I covered, and then that my colleague will cover after me. So to segue into her section, the Texas RRC already has primacy over Class 2 injection wells. And these wells, as I said earlier, are the ones that inject water, gas, or steam into the subsurface with an expectation to get a better oil recovery when they're produced, so when it comes back up. So Becky, can you take it from here?
Hey folks, can you hear me all right? Oh, handshake, thanks. So I'm Becky Smith. I'm our Texas Director for Clean Water Action and Clean Water Fund, which is a national grassroots advocacy organization with nearly 1 million members nationwide. I'm located in Houston and clearly, we're obviously part of our coalition here. And so I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about why specifically we as a coalition are opposing primacy for these Class 6 injections. I'm going to say a few things just really quickly and then get to a couple of slides that demonstrate or go into detail about them a little more. So reasons that we're opposing primacy for our Railroad Commission of Texas. Does not sound like it should be doing anything with oil and gas wells, but in fact does it all. To take that regulatory and capacity away from EPA and rest it here in the state is that we are very concerned about drinking water supplies. And as Alexis was talking about, the Safe Drinking Water Act that came 4 years after the Clean Water Act is really an important policy hook for these protections. So there are already problems that we've heard about with Class 2 injection. We certainly know that Texas experiences frequent drought and growing water insecurity for our water supplies. We know there to be bias at the commission, the Railroad Commission of Texas, excuse me, including very obvious conflicts of interest. Our leaders of the state agencies have a pronounced disregard for climate change, but they're willing to put our communities and water resources at risk in order to solve something they don't seem to actually believe exists. So another conflict here. And then there are numerous overall concerns with the cost and with the efficacy of doing this kind of deep or underground storage for any kind of permanent climate solution. Next slide, please. So we see there are these geyser-like blowouts that happen. Let me grab my notes here. That was not the next one I had, sorry. So we know that, the proliferation of these kinds of orphaned wells and underground injection we already have 8,000 orphaned wells, and the number of those are growing. This is a well that was under the responsibility already of the Railroad Commission of Texas, and they permitted the Class 2 injection well that was operating nearby. They should have been able to foresee that this would happen and did nothing. So we're seeing this orphan well blowout. Next slide, please. Again, I'm out of order. Sorry. So there are also numerous undocumented wells that the Railroad Commission, again, is supposed to be having been regulated these for 70 years now, that they have no record of. So this was this blowout in January 2022 that shows how the underground injection has been overpressurizing the subsurface. This well, again, was not even documented in Railroad Commission's database. And as companies seek permits from this commission for this new class, the Class 6 carbon dioxide storage wells, we and they need to be aware where all of the holes are in the area, but they don't have them all documented. And in fact, the data about this well could be found, some of the undocumented wells can be found in the Midland, Texas Energy Library. However, those records are not even digitalized, so you physically have to go on site to dig through and hope to find some of those. The white substance that you see on the ground, it's not snow or ice, this is salt, and these are salts that are concentrated and caustic. The soil, plants, and animals won't be able to live anywhere near this kind of blowout. Next slide, please. Well, you're keeping me guessing with the order here, sorry. These are inactive wells in the Permian Basin in West Texas. So this is an inactive well in Ward and Crane counties owned by Chevron. The landowners have found multiple blown out wells that continue to pop up one after the other once one has been plugged. So this is another example of what's going wrong with the wells that are currently intended to be regulated under the purview of the Texas Railroad Commission. Next slide. All right, so the Railroad Commission continues to permit hundreds of injection wells in the same areas that are experiencing major earthquakes. So we know that there, it is well documented that our already existing Class 2 wells are causing earthquakes, which the term for that is seismicity throughout the landscape already, which we anticipate frequency and perhaps the severity to grow as more big deep holes are punched. Next slide. This is the Dicetta sinkhole in East Texas between Houston and Beaumont. The sinkhole formed in 2008 and grew even more this year. A class 2, so our existing wells regulated by the RRC, is located 1/10 of a mile from the edge of the sinkhole. This is an active sinkhole, and we expect the impact of class 2 injections on the surface uplift and subsidence these sinkholes, and that more of that induced seismicity or earthquake activity to increase. Next slide. So I mentioned, concern about the Railroad Commission already. The railroad commissioners are elected officials who approve permit for injection wells. The commissioners themselves receive 2/3 of their campaign contributions from these same industry and companies that they are meant to oversee. They have personal financial interests in some of the same companies and have never recused themselves from a decision involving one of the companies that we know they told them to have personal financial interests in. In my organization, we call this a captive agency, which means they're strongly influenced by the companies they're meant to regulate instead of protecting the people in the natural environment that their mission for the commission is meant to protect. So our question here, of course, is if the Texas Railroad Commission isn't properly managing this 70-year-old oil and gas well program for class 2 and the other classes of injection wells, what we fear that we know just what will happen when or if they're given the oversight or primacy over the carbon dioxide injection wells for the future. And I think that's it for me. Is that right?
Yes, thank you,
If
Becky.
so, I'm going to hand it over to our colleague, Arandi Trevino.
Hi, thank you, Becky. My name's Arandi Trevino, and I'm co-founder and executive director of the Raíces Collaborative, a regional grassroots organization founded by 5 Latina women who realize that we can achieve more when we support each other and work together. We focus on helping strengthen community ecosystems. We focus on helping strengthen community ecosystems, and as a team, we help manage the Texas CCS Community Advocacy Coalition. So now I'll talk to you guys about what you can do to be involved to addressing this issue. So the first thing, I'll say is I typically tell people that what you can do is going to depend on a few factors, including and starting with what you're interested in, what type of work you like to do, and what your strengths are, as well as how much time do you have and what's your capacity, right? What's your bandwidth to be involved. And so one of the easiest things that you can do is sign the petition, which we will show in a couple of slides. And so you'll be able to either scan the QR code or go into the link and sign the petition. I'll explain a little bit more once I get to that slide. The other thing that you can do is attend an upcoming Railroad Commission meeting, but in this situation, it's going to be an EPA hearing that you want to attend, since they're the ones that are going to be making the decision on primacy. The next thing I'll say is it's really important to make personalized comments. Of course, it's important to put out facts and, what do we know based off of science and based off of data. But really, for us to be effective when we go up and make personal comments or in-person comments or even written comments, is a personal story is going to go a lot further in terms of having an impact, making people feel something. And if people feel something, then they're more likely to remember what you're telling them. Next, I would say recruit other voices and volunteers. It could be as simple or as close by as, your housemates. Who do you live with? Who's next to you? Who's nearby? Your neighbors, your friends, co-workers. So just recruit other people to either sign the petition or show up and make in-person comments, or even to show up to rallies like these. And then next, I would say, please save the date. We have an in-person press conference on on May 13th in Austin. And that's going to be a really important opportunity to demonstrate just in person the visual of how people are opposed and why we have concerns. Next slide, please. Okay, so now tips for writing effective comments and testimony. I would start with saying, know your audience before you start speaking, know who you're talking to so that you know what type of message you want to deliver and what the point is. And so in this case, it's going to be the EPA, who again is going to be making the decision on primacy. And so you want to frame your comments in a way that aligns with their particular jurisdiction. So you want to emphasize issues of public water supply, underground sources of drinking water, and technical compliance. So focusing on these key impacts is going to be really effective or most effective in this case. Next, I would say be clear and concise. Pick only one or two major issues that you want to, or points that you want to deliver, and focus on that, and make sure that your entire narrative supports those two issues, one or two issues. You don't want to have too many points that you're trying to deliver just because of time. Typically, there is a time constraint. And so I'm kind of skipping to the last one, but you want to practice and time yourself so you deliver it within that time frame. You want to speak from experience, as I mentioned before. Personal experiences are always going to be more impactful. But even if you can mention, you know, what your neighbors are going through, what your community is going through, that's all personal experience that can be really helpful here. And when possible, include data, kind of interweave it in your narrative, because again, the focus is supposed to be the story and the true people impact, but data always helps kind of deliver the point. And then so just these are some this is some advice in terms of what to include for in scope and out of scope for the EPA. And so a couple of things, I know that we're kind of running out of time. So a couple of things that you don't really want to focus on is like the capture facilities themselves and the pipelines, but you do want to focus on injection wells, groundwater related issues, public water supply issues related to underground injection wells, the Railroad Commission's monitoring and enforcement history and underground injection control well program, basically past failures, and the Railroad Commission rules for carbon dioxide storage conforming to federal law. And then here's the petition I mentioned before. You can go to that website or click the QR code, and you'll have an option within the petition to share your story. If you click yes, then one of our team members is going to contact you to capture that story. But you're welcome to also click no thanks.